Hey, welcome back to the fifth and final part of this Khopesh build. Right now I'm making the sheath before I do any of my finish hand sanding or etching, just because I'd like to have a nice clean place to put it where I know that the blade won't get scratched while I'm still working on it. So I'm just tracing out the blade under this leather so I can start cutting out pieces for the sheath. And once I got one side cut out, I use that to mark and cut the other piece of leather for the other side just as a template. A lot of the time I use paper templates for this, but in this case it was just easier to do it this way. So now I cut out the pieces that will be the straps that will go around to hold the blade in. They'll kind of wrap around and snap on just for more retention. Now I'm cutting the welt, or kind of the liner spacer piece that stops the blade from cutting the stitching and also spaces everything out nicely. And then I take some of this thinner leather and cut it. It's going to be kind of like liners. I'm going to cut one for each side. That way there's going to be the nice side of the leather both inside and outside of the sheath, which is something I've never done, and I think it's going to be kind of nice on this one. I'm not doing any carvings or designs on this sheath. I'm just dyeing it black. That's just kind of the look I'm going for on this one. And then I'm going to start sticking things together with the contact cement. I'm going to be using some rivets on this piece, so I've got to drill the holes for those, and I've got to do that before I put the liners on the sheath, just because I want those liners to cover the little brass heads on the inside, just so that that can't scratch the blade. Usually I prefer to use copper rivets. I just think they usually look better, but in this case brass is kind of the right color. So I'm just snipping them off and then peening them over, and I really like the effect these added to it. And then I'm adding these like little, I don't know what they're called, but it's kind of like a ball stud thing. And that's what the straps are going to snap onto. The straps that are going to go across and hold the blade in. Well, now it's time to glue on the liners. So once again, just going back to the contact cement. That's just the easiest way to glue these together before I can sew it. And once again, these are just going to cover those rivet heads. And it's also going to be a little bit more professional in my opinion, just because it's going to have the nice leather on the inside too. And another thing that it's going to do for me is it's going to make the leather a little bit thicker and stiffer. So that way it's going to be a little bit less flexible over the long length of this sheath, which I think is probably a good thing. So I'm just punching out these holes on the drill press so that I can go through and hand stitch through the holes that I've drilled. I ended up doing a whole lot of sewing on this sheath, so I'm really not showing much of this at all, just because there's so much I had to do. But I like the white contrast stitching. I think it goes really well with the black and the rivets. I think it just makes the whole thing pop. Now that the liners are sewn on, I can glue on the welt and the other side of the sheath. And then once I've got that all glued together, I can go back and drill out my holes for the main seam. It's going to kind of hold everything together. So I really decided not to make this easy on myself. Not only did I do a normal line of stitching, but I also decided to do X's going across the edge of the sheath, which took forever, but in the end I think it looks really good. So now I get to buff out the handle and finish that, and then move on to hand sanding the blade before etching. I did not have a ferric tank or an etch tank that was big enough to do this sword when I started out, so I had to make a new one. So I got some 6-inch pipe and glued a cap on for the bottom, and of course made a big mess with the primer, but that's okay, you know, that's part of the fun. And this 6-inch pipe is definitely big enough to fit the sword and pretty much any other project I could see myself doing in the future. The easiest way to attach this to my workbench was just duct tape, so I wrapped a bunch of duct tape around there. It doesn't look great, but it works. So I'm trying out powdered ferric, just because getting the liquid stuff up here is kind of a pain. But I just mixed the powder with distilled water, and that seemed to work just fine. This tank holds a whole bunch of ferric. So I'm definitely not showing my whole etching process here. I did a whole lot of stuff, and it took me a long time to figure it out, but basically I just etched it for a while and then scrubbed it with some superfine steel wool, and that revealed the Hamon pretty well. I'm so happy with how this sword turned out, and I'm really thankful to the customer for really being patient with me, because it took me so long to finally finish this. This is definitely the most challenging project I've ever taken on, and I've never made something that fought me this hard the entire way through. Like, I mean, every single step of the way, there is some setback, some challenge, some problem, something I had to overcome. So I'm not sure I'd do another one of these for a while, but I'm glad I made this one, and I learned so much, and it really pushed me to grow as a maker. So I'm very thankful to the client for asking me to make this, and I'm glad I was able to pull through and make something that I'm proud of. I really like how all the colors kind of work together, and I really like the contrasting cross stitching on the edge. I think that's something I need to definitely do more with black sheaths. But I think this is probably one of the cleanest and classiest looking things I've made to date, especially with that hamon. It's got some really cool kind of mistiness in there that's kind of fun. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully you watched all the other parts in this series. It's been a fun one. Make sure to like and subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me what you thought of this video or this whole build. Make sure to also go follow me on Instagram. I'm way more active there, and you can see all my behind the scenes stuff as well as all the things I make that don't end up here on YouTube. I also do a lot of outdoors and archery kind of stuff, which I think's fun, and if you're interested in that, definitely go follow me. But that's all for today. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.